Ok, hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Yandy Reynoso y soy la asesora de Education USA aquí en la Ciudad de México. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí. Bueno, con nosotros hoy está Benjamín Gutiérrez, es Admissions Counselor de Johns Hopkins University. Entonces, él nos va a hablar acerca sobre cómo hacer resaltar una solicitud para de Johns Hopkins un programa de licenciatura o ingeniería en Estados Unidos y también pues tips sobre las actividades extracurriculares, o sea, cómo escribirlas en nuestra solicitud y sobre los ensayos. Entonces, al final, si tienen alguna pregunta, vamos a contestarlas. Entonces, ahora le voy a dar el tiempo a Ben. Gracias. Entonces, al final, si tienen alguna pregunta,
Hello everyone. Buenas noches. Esta presentación va a ser en inglés, pero si tienes preguntas después en español, lo puedo contestar. Pero, good night everyone. My name is Benjamin Gutierrez, like I was introduced. Thank you again, Education USA, for helping us host this event. And really what this session is intended to do is to give you all a good sense of what universities are looking for outside of just the statistics and the grades and the metrics. Certainly, as you'll see in a little bit, universities in the United States will look at academic record in your school. They will look at the types of courses that you've taken, the rigor of the courses that you've taken. They will take a look at the tests if they require them, such as the SAT and the ACT. But what this session is going to be focused more on is how you can really round out your application and make it stand out outside of those pieces like the testing and the grades. I will say that at this point, at the very beginning, I do want to make a note that this is only for universities that practice a holistic admissions review, only for U.S. universities that practice that, and specifically within that, highly selective U.S. universities. So these are universities with admission rates of 25% or below that are not admitting as many of the students or most of the students that are applying. These are institutions that are receiving above 20, 30,000 applications for spots for incoming classes of around a few thousand students. And so these additional aspects of the application, the extracurriculars and the essays in particular, are ways that you can make your application stand out. And we're actually going to get into pretty specific detail within those two components, and we'll show some examples. It'll be very interactive. Those of you all that are tuning in on Facebook Live can also, ask questions and look at the slides as well. So I'm happy to be here with you all today. So really kind of laying it out very generally to kind of give you a sense of the holistic admissions approach. You have the academic record, which includes the transcript from your school. But not only that, the rigor of the curriculum that you're taking, if you do have advanced options that are available to you, whatever type of curriculum, that is something that we're looking at. But we're also looking at this within the context of your school. So we're never comparing you at one school to a student down the street with a completely different curriculum. We just want to see within this academic record, are you doing as well within that curriculum as you possibly can do. Testing is another piece that we won't go into too much detail about, but testing is another piece that many universities do still require the SAT or the ACT. And so just keep that in mind, that those top two pieces are more kind of the metrics or the statistics that we're looking at. But as you can see, the remaining pieces are more qualitative. They're more personal. These are the pieces where we really try to get a sense of the student's voice, what they are doing outside of the classroom, their personality, their desire to make an impact in the classroom and in their communities. And really, the two that you see highlighted there in blue are things that if you are applying as a senior, or if you are in your final year of school and you're applying to universities like Johns Hopkins, these are really the pieces that you have the most control over when you are filling out your application. If you really think about it, for those of you all that are really kind of going into the application process for this cycle, the first two pieces are already, for the most part, set in stone. Your grades are what they are. Your test scores, for the most part, are what they are. Letters of recommendation are a key component, but again, you don't have control over what your teachers tell us. So really the last two, or the last couple there in blue, those are the ones that you have the most direct control over, and I'll talk about how you can really leverage those. And then the interview component, Johns Hopkins does not require an interview in our process, but there are some universities that do, so just make sure that you ask those questions. To start start off, we'll kind of jump into the extracurricular activities list. So how many of you all are in your final year applying to a U.S. university at the moment, going into the Common Application? You've probably seen what the extracurricular activities section looks like, and really ultimately what these U.S. universities are trying to do is they're trying to get a sense of how you're going to be an active contributor to our campus. There's no expectation that you do and are involved in the same exact things that you did in high school, but if you were involved in high school and if you are making an impact in your community and showing that initiative, then that's a great sign that you're going to come to our campus and not just do well in the classroom, but also get involved in our various student organizations on our campuses as well. So when we're in the admissions committee, we find ourselves asking, not only are you going to do well, but are you going to come to our campus and enjoy being part of those things? The activities list provides insight into potential involvements, as I just said, and so that can be a good way for us in the committee to identify standout applicants. For Hopkins in particular, we want students who are intellectually curious, and that's something that you can certainly highlight in your extracurricular activities. Certainly we see that in your teacher letters and your academic record, but if you are involved in things outside of the classroom, like Science Olympiad, like Model UN, or debates, or even if you're engaging in hobbies like reading blogs about a specific topic in international relations, or if you're reading a certain publication to keep up with the news, those are things that we like to see. And then the other piece is this idea of impact and initiative. And so for us, as you will see, it's not so much about the leadership and the titles and the accolades, but it's really more so about that sustained involvement, that commitment, and that desire to really make an impact in your community, whatever that might look like. A big key point that I'll be talking about a good bit in this session is that it's about quality, not quantity. So it's not that we're going in and wanting to see that you're involved in 20 different things. We actually want to see a little bit more of a thought behind what you're sharing with us in terms of what you're involved in. We want to see those things that you've spent the most time in, 4-year, 3-year commitments, the 10-hour-a-week type of commitments. We really are focused on those, and they don't have to necessarily relate to what you want to study. I think our universities as a whole, for example, if you want to apply to an engineering program, you don't have to prioritize or put down everything related to robotics and engineering. Certainly if you're involved in those things, that is nice to see, but even if you're applying to those programs, it's totally fine to share with us that you did community service, that you were involved in Latin Club, that you were involved in World Affairs clubs, things like that. Organizing your activities list, so going off that point, we'll see an example of how you can organize. We really want to see you organize your activities list by commitments. You shouldn't be going into this extracurricular activities list thinking, what does the university want to see? I'm applying to a business program, but so maybe the first thing that I could show is my internship that I held, which only lasted for about 2 weeks. We actually are more focused on the things that you've spent the most time in and are most committed to. And then we'll also ask that you give explanations. For many of you all that have gone into this section of the Common Application, you know that there's not a lot of space for you to really kind of elaborate very much in detail about your extracurriculars, and I'll actually talk about how you can leverage the different spaces, so actual spaces on the Common Application. Every piece of your application is kind of this valuable, you can think about it as valuable real estate. So trying to avoid repetition as much as you can, and I'll show you a little bit of an example of something like that. So this is an example. So going first, this one won't be as interactive, but the essay ones will. But I do want to point out some things here. This is an example of a extracurricular activity list that is not bad, but it could be done better. It could be executed better. Really here you see one of those cases where the student puts at the very top, that internship may be very meaningful to them, it may be very important to them, but you can see here that they're not really prioritizing the things that they're spending the most time in. I look at this extracurricular activities list and I get a sense that they're actually more interested in Model UN because they've held positions there, they've spent the most time in it. They're actually putting things like founder a little bit lower, so if you founded organizations at your school or in your neighborhoods or in your communities, that's something that you should certainly be emphasizing a little bit more. One of the other things that you can see here is that when it comes to the description, it's not as descriptive. And one of the examples of that is swim team. So again, going back to this idea of putting thought behind it, if you're telling us already that you're part of the swim team, we can pretty much assume that you're going to attend practices and competitions. And so it really isn't, you don't have to let us know that. that because for some things like that, we already kind of get a sense of what you're doing as a part of a team. You'll see that form of repetition up there. So with an editorial intern, the student kind of puts the word intern back in there, and again, this is a valuable space where you're going to try to, and we really want students to try to avoid that repetition. If you've already told us that it's an internship, we'd rather you use that space to talk more about the internship itself than to restate that it is an internship. And then one other thing to note here is that in terms of abbreviations, Model UN or MUN, you may be familiar with it, you may not be, but that's an example of an instance where you should spell that out. That is an organization that is found in many places around the world. So admissions committees, for example, do know what MUN is, but abbreviating things like SecGen, which is the leadership position in that organization, and even the name of the organization itself, you want to be wary of that because particularly if it is an organization that is regionally focused or here in Mexico or wherever you're coming from, you can expect that the admissions officer knows exactly what it is. And so for those types of things, try to avoid abbreviations as much as you can. So with that being said, this is one that's a little bit stronger. This is one that I think certain highlights here that I want to point out. You can see that they've prioritized their extracurricular activity list based off the things that we get a sense that they're the most interested in. The first thing that they talk about is this Model UN. And again, this student could be applying to applied mathematics, they could be applying to computer science, and it's not going to be a detriment to their application that the first thing that they talk about is something that is not science or technology focused. You can see the description there as well. It's really starting with an action verb. So as you think about, you don't have to use the word I every time that you write a description. That is a space that you can use for other things as well. So facilitating general and leadership meetings, mentoring new members. Again, this impact and initiative that we're looking to understand. What are you actually doing within the roles that you've held? The intern piece you can see here, it's still towards the top, but there isn't as much repetition. And as you can see back here, intern, we really at this point would want to know what you researched. And this student kind of just says the word research, but particularly for a place like Hopkins, we're interested to see what are you actually doing your research on. This student is a little bit more descriptive, doing research in terms of local news and assisting with reporting. And then the other things that you see here I think are also very important. Family responsibilities right here. Caring for grandparents. That is something that you should be letting us know about. This is something that takes up time in your day. Things that maybe you don't think about as an extracurricular. Maybe if it's not an approved organization at your school or an official organization at your school. It's totally fine if you let us know about those things that maybe you're doing on your own. So caring for grandparents, part-time jobs. Again, like I mentioned, if you're a student that wakes up every morning and for about 15 minutes reads a journal on the website or researches topics in the field of space science or whatever's happening in the field of international relations or world politics, those are things that you can certainly let us know. I spend, X amount of hours per week just reading and catching up on what's going on. So don't feel like you can't include those on your extracurricular activities list. And then even the swim team piece right here. So you can see here their team member, and then they do talk about practice, but they actually go into a little bit more about the descriptives there. This is pretty impressive that the student actually kind of let us know a little bit more specifically about how intensive their practices are. So we know that they're practicing, but how intensive is that? How much of a time commitment is it? Because again, we want to understand what are you spending your time in outside of the classroom, and how does that help us understand your life in the academic areas? And then another thing to note here, this student also indicates that they've been practicing classical piano since 5 years old. It is okay to talk about commitments that you've sustained since you were very young, but we do want you to focus on the last 4 years or 3 years of your high school years. So you shouldn't be letting us know things that you did when you were in elementary school or early on when you were in your when you were 9 or 8 years old. But if there is something that you have sustained onto your high school years, then there's certainly a place for that. One last piece that I'll note here is you can see how this student is leveraging this valuable space in the subject. So you can see this student is still abbreviating here. I think that that's one of the critical pieces that they could probably work on. But you can see that in the former one, they're including their leadership positions here, whereas here, you have this space up here, which gives you more space below to really just kind of elaborate a little bit more on that impact and initiative piece. To make this interactive, how do you feel like this could be made stronger? So this is going back to the first one. So if we're looking at this extracurricular activity list, what is a piece of advice that you think we could give to this student? Yep. So the one in box, yes. So it's activities. What do you mean by that?
What does he do
Mm-hmm.
in this position?
Yes. So what does he do? It's really not as descriptive there. Yes.
What inspired him to do that, to be the founder?
Yes. So what inspired him to be the founder of this, or what inspired him to? There's a story behind that, I would assume. And what was that initiative that he took to get that organization off the ground? Yes.
And maybe a little bit of how it has changed.
Yes. That's a great point. So how it has changed as well. So Compliments Club, maybe since its founding, since he started the organization, letting us know that it's grown from 3 to 20 people. Even if it's not an astronomical growth, the fact that it's building steam is really nice. So I think that's a good point. The growth of the organization, the what brought it about, and the results. Yeah. So the results may be kind of what you just brought up. Anything else? What else? So I think another thing here is also talking about maybe any initiative that the student took. Like maybe did they work with a faculty member to get it started? Did they work with a high school administrator, so a person at their school or in their community, like a principal or a headmaster? So those are things that can really be used to enhance that extracurricular activities piece. Now moving on to the essays, so we're going to look at a few different types of essays, but really the point of the essay and the goal of the essay is kind of this additional piece of understanding. So we're seeing in the extracurriculars kind of what you're involved in, how you're contributing in your community, and likely how you'd contribute on our campuses. But ultimately with the essay, we want to get a sense more of your personality. We're looking to build campus communities that are diverse, not just in terms of where students are coming from, not just in terms of certain other aspects and what schools they're coming from, but also diverse in terms of opinions, perspectives, beliefs, backgrounds, stories. And the essay can really be a place where you can reveal that personality, and it can also be a place where you can add something to your application, maybe a story, maybe a part of your background that hasn't been mentioned anywhere else on the application. So that first point is very important. Complements, but does not repeat. Again, repetition. You want to avoid repetition. The essays should not be a summary of your extracurriculars, because we're already seeing this. So your essay shouldn't be, first paragraph, I did an internship, second paragraph, and I'm also on the swim team, and third paragraph, I also do Model UN. The essay should really be kind of this additional supplement, and you can certainly elaborate on something you let us know about in the extracurriculars, but it can be an additional piece where you can elaborate more detail. Reveals personality is another piece. This is where you're expected to really write about yourself. So I'll talk about the different types of essays, but in the essay, feel free to be yourself. We know that it's an exercise that not many of you all have had a lot of opportunities doing, writing about yourself and being reflective about yourself. And we'll provide some examples about what some good essays look like. So there are 3 types of essays that we're going to go through. The first is the personal statement. The personal statement is the one that you will find on what is called the Common Application. It's the one that will go to every university that you apply through the Common Application to. So make sure that you're not making this one university specific, because that would then go to everyone, and you don't want that to happen. But the personal statement really is exactly how it sounds. It is about you. The supplemental essay is about it's an additional piece where when you submit your application to specific universities, they typically respond to you with a prompt saying, in addition to your application, we ask that you write this additional supplement that is university specific. And we'll talk about the 2 types that I have up there. So the personal statement, it is designed, again, to help us understand who you are in terms of your personal qualities, what you bring culturally, what you bring in terms of your personality and perspective and opinions, and how, again, that will add to our community. This is, again, a piece where you should not be afraid to use I and we and me. You should be using the first person because, again, this essay is about you. The other piece is that it should be personality driven, not plot driven. And so a common question that we get is, how can I make my essay distinctive among all of the applications that are applying? And I think the more specific you can get in terms of your own personality and reflections about a moment. So we don't want you to give us a play-by-play or a blow-by-blow summary of a soccer match or a basketball match, because that isn't as personality driven. You can tell us, and the game started and they scored and then we scored and they scored again and then we scored too and we won the state championship or the regional championship. That doesn't really tell us much about you. But if you inject or if you add much more of a personal, like a why this matters and what I learned from this, if you talk about a specific moment in time rather than just a broad period of your life or a broad event, if you go granular and talk a little bit about an actual interaction, so using dialogue, maybe talking to us about a conversation that you had with a friend or a grandparent that helped you think about things a little bit differently. I think that allows you to add your personality a little bit more into the application. And then the last piece is consider the audience and be conscious of the audience. And so this is a point that is not we're not saying in this point that you should write an essay because you feel like that's what the university wants to hear. You should never go into a personal statement or an essay, really, writing it to fit whatever the university wants to hear. This should be very much about your hobbies and your interests and your passions. But what this final point means that we want you to be able to talk about politics if that's something you're passionate about, or religion if that's something that you're passionate about. But be cognizant that the person reading the application may not believe or may not fall in line with the things that you believe. And so when you talk about certain things that are maybe a little bit more not controversial, but a little bit more sensitive, make sure that you're doing it in a positive way, elevating your position, certainly, but without tearing down any other position. We want students that are, again, going to come to our campus and be open-minded, be willing to engage with students that are different than them and engage in those fruitful and productive discussions. And so ultimately, just be careful when you're talking about those more sensitive topics, but you by no means shouldn't write about those things if they're important to you. Okay, so we're going to actually look at 3 essays. And then this one will take about, let's see, how are we doing on time? We'll take about 2 minutes. It's not too much. And then we'll come back together and we'll talk a little bit about maybe what this essay does well and then what maybe they could do a little bit better. Okay. Even if you're not finished, you can keep reading it, but in the audience, what are some things that you think this student does well? Yes?
Maybe talk about, his or her background.
Yeah.
Like, this person is actually passionate about learning from their story of their family.
Yeah. And if you wouldn't mind, I think we're going to pass around the microphone so that you can,
yeah.
just so people can hear. So you think this student does a great job of really kind of talking about their own story and their background, and maybe a little glimpse into their family and their cultural, their life. That's a great point. Yes. Anyone else? Yes. Oh. Sorry. Yeah.
Hold on.
Maybe let the audience to see
how does this person relates to his family or her family, like that they are close, that he has like this trust to go for work with his or her mother when asking for knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's a very personal piece. It's a really, it's full of personality as well. You see the exclamation points, which are totally fine, talking about a specific moment in time and that relationship with one of her loved ones. I think that those pieces are very important, and the specificity of the moment and the actual. She's not talking about changing the world, or he is not talking about changing the world. They're not talking about ending world hunger or solving these crazy problems, and it's not academic in nature as well. It's really just a glimpse into their personal story in their life and someone that they love. So yes, excellent point. What are some things maybe that the student could have done a little bit better? Yes, in the back.
That maybe she's not talking about like, or he, they're not talking about like how it influenced them to be like, to do the things that they care about, and it's just talking about like an experience, but not like the result of that experience.
Yeah, so that reflection piece that I was talking about, you know, really the student talking about what they learned from it and making it more of a, because at the end of the day, again, we want to understand what the student's going to bring to our campus, and that personal reflection at the very end. And this student, I mean, this is a snippet of an excerpt of an essay, and so they could have very well spent their last essay or piece of it talking about you know, their own reflections, and this is why this matters. This is how I've grown because of my grandmother, and this is how I've come to appreciate certain things that I will certainly bring to a college campus later on. Another piece here is that who do we learn more about in this essay? Her grandmother, their grandmother. So I think one piece here is, again, this is the personal statement, and one of the prompts on the Common Application is talking about someone that you look up to and care about, and someone who's influenced you. You want to, again, talk about yourself. So it is okay to talk about you know, a loved one or somebody you look up to, but at the end of the day, the essay should at least end or reflect at the very end of the day on you as a person. So I really like Grandma Luisa, but she's ultimately not the one coming to our campus. And so I think that that's one of the key points here to keep in mind. But the way that it's written, I think, is a really excellent example. You know, they're straying away from injecting little exclamation points, injecting other little pieces in there that are very personal. I think that that's a great example. So stylistically, it's very strong, but again, keeping that in mind. This one's long, so I'll give you guys 3 minutes to summarize or to find out what you like about the essay, but then also what you feel like the student could do a little bit better. So this one's a little bit longer, so I'll give you a little more time. And I'm happy I have a big screen, because when I don't have a big screen, this becomes a lot more difficult. Okay. Even if you're not done reading it, does somebody want to talk maybe a little bit about what they liked about the essay, some strengths? Yes.
I like the metaphors that he uses or she uses. I think he's a he, but yeah, because he uses really beautiful examples of something that is going to end up. and I think he's starting with a scientific metaphor, and then he applies it to life. And that's
Yeah. And this student, I think, not everyone has to have such a creative, metaphor built into their essay, but I think this student does a really interesting thing here by kind of looping in something that they're naturally passionate about. I mean, this student could be applying to a program that is not physics related, but if this is an area that they're just really passionate about, you can get a sense of their academic interest just in this essay. And I think it's okay to include all of these random things. I mean, it doesn't have to be physics concepts. It can be, your favorite song lyrics or your favorite band, but you can kind of get a sense that this student just naturally is passionate about scientific topics. They don't write their essay solely on scientific topics. It's not a research abstract or a research topic paper, but they're doing it in a way where it's interweaving with some of the things that they're doing that are not even academic related. Anyone else? Does anyone else have a thought? Yes, right back there. Oh, pink shirt.
Well, I see two things.
Yeah.
The first one is that I can see that I think it's a he too. So
Okay.
I think he's persistent because he keeps trying and trying until he gets it.
Yeah.
And in the end, in the reflection, he emphasizes it. So first one, that we can see their personality, and second, that they did reflect.
Yeah, they reflected. I think that's an excellent piece. And the first one could have very well reflected. I mean, this one's much longer. The other one might have just been a snippet. But that reflection is a very important piece. And then the other thing is within here, what was the first point you brought up? I just want you to restate that one, because I thought that was very, very important. Yeah, so the persistence piece. So how many of you all, just by a show of hands, got that sense of persistence, like tenacity? So I think a good exercise in starting to write an essay is really thinking about those one or two personal qualities and descriptors that you want the admissions committee to know about yourself. So this student may very well have, before they even started writing their essay, on a piece of paper, on a board, they probably did a lot of self-reflection and said, what are some things that the admissions committee is not getting already? I'm someone who I pride myself on being persistent. Or one student might pride themselves on being funny or witty. One student might pride themselves on being, intellectually curious and maybe a little bit more serious, but just curious. And so when you're thinking about and starting writing your essays, or for many of you all that are maybe thinking of or are in the process of, I think if you can really build your essay around a core idea or a personality trait, I think that's very important. So persistence as well here, very, very important. You'll also notice that this student is not talking about, again, this idea of changing the world or solving the world's problems. I mean, the fact that they incorporated just a mundane day in their working for this cake store. It's a part-time job, likely. The student kind of maybe does it part-time, few hours a week, but they're kind of zoning in on a specific little thing that is tying a bow on cake boxes, and it's something that was very difficult to them. And so again, when you're thinking about these essays, they don't need to be, these big grandiose topics. They don't need to be, you winning a state championship or you winning a competition. It can be about failure. It can be about hardship. It can be about struggle and ultimately overcoming that struggle. And so these types of essays are really strong, and this is a good example of that. And then the last one here, will take about 2 minutes just for the sake of time. But this one's the last one that we're going to be looking at in terms of the personal statement. And so I just want to get a sense of what you all think of this one. Okay. We'll come back together. Again, if you haven't finished, you can keep reading. But what are some things here that are maybe some strengths of the essay? Yes, in the front. Right here. Yeah. And then wait.
Well, I think that the first paragraph is really engaging,
Mm-hmm.
and it really shows a personal experience that she had or he had.
Yeah, we don't really know who, but.
And I think that another strength is that from the transition of the first paragraph to the second paragraph, there was a really neat explanation of why that experience changed him or her.
So that's an excellent point. Okay, it is on. So that's an excellent point. So there is the reflection piece at the end, so how it changed. Oh, it changed. How it changed. And then also the beginning, it's very, very engaging. So it's a specific moment, you know, where they were doing this summer internship, and this was kind of, it catches you right out the gate. The first sentence is heart monitor flatlined, my heart stopped. Pretty dramatic. Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts on this? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's interesting how this experience, this person reflects in, and how it affected to be sure of what they wanted to study.
Yeah.
Like, this experience helped them to be sure they wanted to be a doctor.
Sure.
And they want to do something for people who have cancer and stuff like that. And they also mentioned that they would be more than happy to be part of this college and do research to help people. So
yeah, so I think you've zoned in on more of the reflection piece. So the event, you know, again, this idea of personality versus plot, you know, the first paragraph is a lot of plot, but the personality does come out a little bit in the last two. You know, you get a sense of the reflection and the so what, why does this matter, how this has, you know, made me want to become a physician, a doctor. And so I think that, like you said, there is that reflection there, which is always very, very important for the essay, and really rounding it out at the end, talking about why that matters. Excellent. Yes, in the back.
I also, like, I feel like a large part of it, rather than like showing their personality, it's kind of telling you instead of showing you their personality and telling you what they're passionate about, and like instead of like showing you that they're gonna do it, and like that might not be as like
I think you bring up an excellent point here. This idea of showing, not telling, finding ways to really tell us, you know, or show us that you're passionate about certain areas without necessarily telling us outright, you know, I want to be a doctor, this is what I want to do, and this is why I want to go to your school. Maybe focusing a little bit more on, that's an excellent point as well. I think that showing rather than just purely telling, I think is very important. And this student does do a little bit of showing, but ultimately at the end, they're just saying that this is what I want to do. Good point. Yes, in the back.
I feel like a lot of the second paragraph feels very repetitive. Like they repeat prestigious institution over and over again. They repeat life-saving. Like they could have cut down maybe on some of those statements that seem to repeat themselves in order to like further express, like she said, to further show what they want to do and who they are instead of just saying it, you know?
Yeah, and I think you know, you bring up a good point there that just telling, it's telling a lot. It's like, I want to go to your prestigious institution, but it's not really showing, you know, why you would be someone who would add to the campus community. You're not showing those additional qualities that I was talking about. The first student talked about, you know, built their essay around kind of this idea of determination. This student is not really showing as much that, it's just kind of telling us that they want to be a physician. And then I guess another piece that I want to note here is that on our campuses and in the admissions process, we want to know what the student is going to do on our campus and how they're going to enjoy, you know, being involved on campus, and the perspectives and the opinions that they're going to bring outside of the campus. And we really want to know how they're going to do in those, and how they're going to enjoy those 4 years of undergraduate experience on our campus. In the US, you don't really become a doctor until medical school. So you do your undergrad and then you apply to medical school. And this student you kind of get a sense in this essay that they want to come to our school just because they want to be a doctor. And I think that in an essay, you really need to be kind of thinking about, I want to tell you the best parts about myself, my hobbies, my interests, even if they're not related to my career path. This is a student where there's an area of the application where you can write future plans. And it gives you the option, physician, veterinary, marketing communications, political work. And so we're probably already seeing it there. So again, this idea of repetition, we're already seeing that they want to be a doctor. And then in terms of the internship that they did, they're probably also likely putting that in their extracurricular somewhere. So it's kind of restating a lot of that. And again, it's very plot driven. And so I think one of the things here to note is that we as institutions, we want to know how you're going to be a community member for your 4 years of undergrad. And this is kind of giving the sense that the student just wants to use our university as a stepping stone. And so I don't think that the essay necessarily is as impactful when paired with the other elements of the application that we've seen before. So kind of summing everything up, so this is an excerpt of an essay. They actually did do a good job of reflecting at the end, but we just include this excerpt. And so this is a student that I think believe this essay and then this one are actually found on our Essays That Worked page on our website. So students that were admitted to the university who are doing wonderful things on our campus. This is actually an essay that was written by an admissions counselor in our office. This is an essay that we see a good bit. They see Johns Hopkins Medical School and they think, I want them to know that I want to do medicine, and they're kind of thinking 5, 10 steps down the road. And so, I think this one is a well-written essay, but I think when going back to these pieces, like the pieces of repetition, like the pieces of really trying to understand how you're going to be a campus community member, we'd much rather see someone talk about their interests and their hobbies, like in something like comic books, or maybe something that they like reading about, outside during leisure time, then really, we don't need to get a sense that the student is like trying to save the world. Certainly, if you want to do those things, then you can let us know. But this is doing a little bit too much of that. So the other two essays that we'll talk about pretty briefly are the university essays. The university essay is typically the essay that you see that asks you why X university. So when you apply to a university, when you submit your application, they'll send you kind of a blurb and it'll say, talk to us about why. And really here, doing research is the best thing that you can be doing, and research about an institution that also includes things that are non-academic. And so the more specific you are about an institution, the better. So these essays should really pass what is called the whiteout test. So essentially, if you write your essay about a university, like why, I want to go to X university because of these reasons, if you take out the name of that university, does that essay still make sense? If you write your essay as general as, I want a university, X university, because it's in a big city and has a lot of research opportunities in the field of biology, and has some sports teams, but without going into specific detail about the sports teams. If you took out the name of that university, I guarantee that there are other universities that are also in that same city that are also that have really strong research opportunities in biology. And so ultimately, how specific can you get is a really big question you should be asking. Like, are there specific researchers? Maybe thinking about that. Are there certain, one essay that I think would be great for this is, it's totally okay if you want to go to a university, or a reason why that university is one that you want to go to is maybe you're really involved in music and you notice that that institution has a specific musical theater organization that you really want to be a part of, and you've seen their productions on YouTube and you spend a lot of time doing that, and that's one of the reasons why you want to go to that campus on top of the other reasons like the academics, things like that. That would show us that you've done your research, that you're actually passionate about one aspect of our institution, and ultimately doing your research in that sense and making sure it passes the whiteout test is an important piece. So feel free to also think about the non-academics when you're applying to a university and filling out this essay. The second type is the intellectual exercise, and so this one's a little bit different. So some universities ask you questions like that are very vague, that in some cases don't really ask you much and expect you to kind of show this sense of creativity. One example of this, I travel with a representative from University of Chicago, and they're known for asking very unique questions such as find X, where is Waldo really? And so those questions are really kind of meant to make you think and really hone in and talk about a topic based on what you're interested in. So X for someone might be a specific variable in a formula that they've been trying to figure out. X could be a specific location in history or in the world that they like, that they maybe want to talk about. Maybe they're more interested in geography or travel. So really X can be anything depending on what that student's interests are. And then one other thing to note here is that with these essays, it's not about the right answer. You shouldn't be going into these essays thinking, okay, what does the university want me to say? What is the right answer? Rather, these are intended to think more and to see more of your thought process. So if it is something that is intellectually stimulating or asking you to solve a problem, we're really more interested in the process that you take in getting to that end product than actually finding the right solution. And then ultimately, again, writing your essay and focusing in on things that you're comfortable about writing, things that you're interested in, things that you're curious about, and that'll ultimately make this intellectual essay response much more authentic. And then at the end, you still do want to make sure you're answering the prompt. And so I'll give you an example of what Hopkins look like. We kind of have a hybrid of the why university as well as the intellectual exercise. And then the last point about making sure that you're answering the prompt is very important. So this is Hopkins's. So a successful student at Hopkins make the biggest impact by collaborating with others, including peers, mentors, and professors. Talk about a time in or outside of the classroom when you worked with others and what you learned from this experience. So ultimately, what do you think that we're wanting to get a sense of when you read this prompt? Yes?
You're trying to figure out what this person is involved with, how they get involved and how active they are and how much of an impact they can have, and also what they take away, like not only what they give but also what they can take away and then apply to other things.
So the reflection piece and how they're interacting with others and collaborating. Why do you think we're asking about collaboration? I guess
yes, how open this person is about working with other people, how open is this person about listening to other point of view, and how can this person complement his knowledge with the other people's knowledge.
Yes, I think a great point there that you noticed. I mean, I think reading the prompt and really getting at the heart of what collaboration is, how you're working with others and how each person in the group complements each other. I think that's a great way to think about. When you're thinking and reading the prompt, again, you should read this, and if you need to pull out a dictionary and actually look at the definition, even if you know what collaborating is, looking at the actual definition of collaborating to make sure that you're actually answering it in the right way. And I think you kind of gave a great summary and explanation of what collaborating it is really finding others who can complement you on a project or on an initiative or something like that. Why do you think a university like Hopkins is asking something like this? Yes?
Because the universities want to get a sense of how this person will fit in at their campus and at their student organizations, classes, other parts of their campus.
Yeah.
So they just want to figure out who they are.
A good way to think about these essays, these supplements particularly, is that universities are typically asking for about something that is a core value of theirs, a core value of the institution. And at Hopkins, on top of those other pieces that I just mentioned, collaborating is such a huge piece. As a research institution, we want students that are going to work well with others in a lab setting outside of the classroom, and that is a core value of us. So if you go in and you're answering a supplement and you're saying to yourself, actually, I don't like collaborating, then you probably shouldn't be applying to that institution, in this case Hopkins. If another university is asking you about, I don't know, this is a crazy example, but what is your favorite sport? And then you actually don't like sports, that might be a showing sign that you maybe shouldn't or you should really reconsider. And so the essays are typically asked because universities want to get a sense of your values and if they align with the institution. And if your values, if you feel like you're having a difficult time writing these essays, for that Find X essay, if you're having fun writing it and thinking about that, you know, being creative and thinking about that in a very unique way, then that university is going to be a blast for you because you're going to go and you're going to be just as stimulated and active. And so that's why we asked that. So 2 examples, and then we'll round out the application at the end, or round out the presentation. But we'll take like about a minute to read this one, and then we'll just quickly talk about maybe some strengths or weaknesses. Okay, even if you're not finished. What are some thoughts? In the front here. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this person really gets what collaborating is.
Why do you say that?
I'm like, she's not really collaborating. I mean, like, at first she mentions she or he considers this other person like inferior, and I think that's kind of rude.
Yeah.
Also, in the part that she or he mentions about outlining like the instructions and that, I'm like, she or he is not giving this other person like the opportunity to express themselves or to give ideas or to give something to the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you bring up a good point there that this student kind of misses the mark a little bit when it comes to collaboration. Sure, they're working with others, but you don't really get a sense that they truly understand the meaning of collaboration. What do you think this essay leans a little bit more towards too? Like, what are you getting a sense that this student's writing this essay, and what is she really trying to convey here? Like, at the end of the day, what's your biggest thing that, yeah.
Like a sense of leadership, but also it comes off a little condescending because she's like treating the other student as like, they're treating the other student as like,
I think you bring up the word that I was thinking here. This student is kind of seeing this essay as a way for her to talk about leadership. And leadership is not necessarily, it's really not the same thing as collaboration. You know, and there's a way to be a leader, certainly, in a collaborative space. But I think, again, this goes back to pulling out the dictionary and really looking at what a word means, like really going into the prompt and getting at what does this university want to know about me? And I think this student kind of shifts throughout their essay into more of a leadership space. And we on our end just want to see, how are you working with others? I think with our essay prompt, a lot of students are scared to talk about failure, are scared to talk about their own areas where they're not as strong. But collaboration is naturally, by nature, again, finding this complement to the areas that you maybe need help in, or areas that you recognize are not as strong. So, a strong, actually we'll look at the next one, but, I think that being really intentional about how you go about reading the prompt, I think is very important. And it's not necessarily synonymous with leadership. Collaboration is not necessarily the same thing as some of these other kind of leadership qualities that you might see. And then this was the last essay. Really, this one is just a good example. So I'll just kind of address why it is. I think this student from the front end, first of all, they're not necessarily talking about, again, an academic thing. They're talking about something that they're doing. Eagle Scout is, if you're familiar with Boy Scouts, Eagle Scout is something where you're doing service. Typically, a student is working towards a leadership position. Eagle Scouts are, typically a leadership position. But this student does a better job of I think that kind of third sentence, in order to create a successful video, I had to work alongside our troop leader, or I had to work alongside our troop leader, our wilderness guide, and our other scouts who assisted me in shooting. So I think, being a little bit more open, like, I'm not the best at this, and so I'm going to actually lean on other people who are stronger in this. And then the last paragraph here, I would be able to effectively work together with others. Collaborating on this video project taught me that the most rewarding projects are the ones in which everyone works together towards a shared goal. It's not my A, it's not my award, it is our award. And so you'll see that this one does a lot of I, me. This student does a little bit more of, certainly they do my, but they talk about we, us. And so again, really getting at the sense of what collaboration means. So those are just two examples, but as you're going through the supplemental essay process, again, just really trying to understand, why is a university asking this? What do they want to know about me? And certainly talking about things that you're passionate about and you're interested in, but again, answering that prompt to the best of your ability. So I think to round it all out, essays, some writing tips here. Write in the first person. I talked about that at the beginning. It is important to really be reflective, and this helps you do so. Thinking about who your audience is. Again, you're not writing to a university or to satisfy them or to fill the box that you think that they want you to fill. But ultimately, if you're thinking about a topic that is a little bit more sensitive, making sure you're aware of that. Feel free to stray from the 5-paragraph format with the introduction and the thesis and the 3 supporting paragraphs and the conclusion, which you've been so used to writing in some of your analytical type of writing classes. This can be written in prose. You can include dialogue. You can include slang if you feel it's appropriate. We still want it to be well written, but if you're talking about like orale or güey or whatever, you can throw that in there. I'm sorry, I'm I'm using topics from here, but you know, feel free to incorporate, you know, some creative elements to your essay. Don't feel like you have to write it like a essay that you write in class. And then also proofread, proofread, proofread. This will take a few drafts. Make sure you're getting people to look over your essay. If you ever need help, Education USA also does a lot of editing and proofreading for essays if you have any questions. And then at the end of the day, reiterating again, this should be a complementary piece to your application, not a repetitive piece. These should be a sign or a place where you let us know what type of community member you're going to be on our campus for the 4 years of undergraduate experience and the different opinions and beliefs and perspectives that you bring to our community. So, I know that with that being said, we have a few more minutes before the end of the presentation. It was about an hour. So are there any questions about anything that I spoke about? Anything? Yes?
For the personal statement, which
Sure.
is for the Common App,
Yeah.
would you say it is better to start thinking about a specific prompt or to simply start thinking about a topic you want to talk about and then looking at the prompts afterward?
That's a good question. I don't know. I feel like depending on the student, you have a different process. I don't know if there is a right answer to your question. I mean, I know that when I was applying a few moons ago, I looked at the prompts and picked a prompt first and then started writing about something. And I felt like that helped me kind of narrow it down a little bit, and then I kind of elaborated on it. But I don't know. I don't know if there's a right answer to your question. I think there is a piece and a process of really trying to be, you have to reflect before, you have to make an outline, you can't just jump right into the essay. You have to think about your process and think about kind of what are the 1 or 2 personality traits that you're really trying to get across, and then how can you do that within the prompts and the word limit that is offered. But yeah, I don't have a specific piece of advice there, unfortunately. Yeah. Yes, in the back.
Like, should you focus on one, like if you're gonna start a story or like
Sure.
a narrative or whatever that is supposed to, like that shows like a specific value or a specific thing that you like care about and you're gonna bring to the college, whatever. Should you do like one story, or should there be like and what I mean is, should you go really deep on that specific story, or should you use more than one like example?
That's a great question. And this is one that I do have a suggestion for. I think the more that you focus on one story in one moment, the better. Certainly if you do if it's all connected in some way, like if you do a present day, flashback, present day type format, but if it's still related to the same story and theme and topic, that is okay. But generally, rule of thumb is that you should try to focus on one moment, one reflection on one thing, rather than jumping around from moment to moment. And I think that the more detailed and specific you can be about that one specific moment, the more personal the essay is going to be, and the more unique it's going to be, because only you have lived those specific moments that you've lived with your friends, with your family, with your reflections. And so the more specific and zoned in you are on one moment, the more effective the essay will be in the process.
And do you think that like you can express more than one value with one story, even if they're like a little bit like not like like two like very connected values, or that you could like really see easily with something, but like two like separate?
I think there is definitely a way. I think this student, on top of determined, I think there's kind of like a sense of quirkiness, like a student might have, and if you're not familiar with the word quirky, it's basically like, you know, some people think this word is derogatory, but I actually like geeky, you know, like when you geek out about something, when you're like, oh, this is really cool, like this academic concept is awesome, like this student's kind of this. And so when this student might have been thinking about, you know, the one or two personality traits that they wanted to show, it's, okay, maybe I want to let the committee know that I'm determined, but then also I want to interweave aspects where I'm just letting them know kind of the quirky things that I like reading about. And so, you know, they might kind of, so there is a way to interweave them. And I think that's where the outline comes in. You know, you don't just jump into an essay, you think about kind of the two personality traits that you want to get across, how you can do that, and then what's an example or moment in your life where, you know, in this case, you know, persistence and quirky, this is how I'm going to write. These are the ways I'm going to intertwine it. And so I think, again, it's going to take a little bit of thought. It's going to take a little bit of reflection. It's going to take a little bit of outlining. And how do I want to connect these two topics? But if you can do it in a seamless way, I know that that's easier said than done. But I think that reflection on the front end, it is possible. It is possible. And some of the essays that we have on Essays That Worked on that webpage do a good job of that. Yes.
I want to ask, what happens when you want to go to an area or to an undergrad, but you have an interest in other topics? Should you focus on other topics, or should you focus on this area that you want to go to?
This essay does not need to be the place where it certainly can be a place where you can touch on your interest in that academic area, but you don't have to use your essay to talk about, like, again, that one student who is looking to do medicine, we'll see that in other areas of the application, in the areas that they're strong in the part where they can indicate future plans, and also the place where you can indicate what major you want to do. But your essay doesn't need to be about that. Your essay, you know, if someone's applying to for example, a international studies program, they can write their essay about, you know, they're passionate about space, you know, and so I think the essay can really be, again, a complement. Not everything has to kind of reiterate, like, in my future plans, I want to say that I want to do, you know, engineering. And then in my extracurriculars, I'm going to prioritize everything that's engineering. And then my essay also has to be engineering. That's not the process we have. We really want to get more of a broad kind of sense of what that student likes and how they're going to come to our campus and maybe do engineering, but then they might get involved in, you know, musical theater or a cappella. And those students are the most engaged. Those students are the most passionate because they have those various interests. And so don't feel like the essay needs to be about what you're specifically interested in. We'll take maybe one more question, and then we'll move into just a very brief overview of Johns Hopkins. And we also brought profiles, which we have in the front. But I'll go through it. I know you guys, you know, you've been here for an hour, and you got to get home. So, yes.
So I just want to know, to make sure, you mentioned that we shouldn't send the same essay to the multiple universities. I just want to make sure that that's correct.
So yes, so just to clarify, so the personal statement is the one that you are going to be filling out on the common application. The common application, you can send it to Hopkins, and then there are over 400 other partner institutions where you can also send it to them, but they all get the same essay. So in your personal statement, you should not be saying, and this is why I want to go to Johns Hopkins, because that application, you're going to submit it not just to Hopkins, but you're going to submit it to other schools as well. So, but the supplemental essay is essentially what it sounds like. You submit your main application, the common application, which is where the personal statement is, and then once you've submitted, once you said, hey, I'm applying, you get an email from the institutions that you applied to, and they'll say, okay, we're happy that you're applying. Here's an additional essay that you have to write for us. So the supplements are university specific. So personal statement, that main application essay, don't indicate a specific university, but then the supplement, yes. That is where you can say, this is why I want to go to your school, or this is where I can say, like, and this is how I'll be a fit for your campus community.
Thanks.
All right. Yes, oh, one more question, yeah.
But, okay, so do most colleges send ask for a supplement essay?
Some don't have a supplement. Hopkins does. Other universities do. I also travel with a representative from Notre Dame. They ask the why Notre Dame essay. Some do, some don't. You always want to make sure that you should be getting an email from the university, but you always want to make sure that on their website if they do, just check with the admissions officer from that school and check to see if they do or if they don't, and if they do, what is it, and how many do I have to submit. But for us, it's just one, and you get that email after you apply. Yeah, so it depends. Wonderful. So very, very briefly, just talk a little bit about the school. So I talked a little bit about some of our values, and it is really important for us in the application process and the things that we see that we get a sense of the student's academic character, because our institution is really built around this idea of research and discovery. We were the nation's first research institution when we were founded in 1876 by Johns Hopkins. He actually founded not just the university, which is what I represent, but also the Johns Hopkins Hospital. You can see some of the affiliated institutions, some of the most world-renowned institutions that are affiliated with the hospital, and then many others, School of Advanced International Studies. We have campuses in Nanjing, Bologna, Italy, Washington, D.C. Students can come and study international studies. But here, I'm specifically talking about and representing our undergraduate program, the Whiting School of Engineering. We're located in Baltimore, Maryland, just 45 minutes north of Washington, D.C., and this is our campus. So it's very quintessentially the beautiful red brick marble, all four seasons. You feel like you're in a smaller liberal arts college in the middle of New Hampshire and New England, but this is just, when you look inside of the buildings, you see all of that research happening. We have an archaeological museum on our campus where students are curating exhibits. We have various biomedical engineering and research laboratories studying tissues and tissue engineering. We actually just had a professor that won a Nobel Prize 3 days ago for helping identify a protein that, due to low oxygen levels, can actually cause certain things like cancer and other diseases, and that's going to be a groundbreaking discovery that's going to change the field of medicine. And students are doing research with these professors on our campus. We have an observatory on our campus, our Physics and Astronomy Center, where we actually have the operations center for the Hubble Space Telescope. And so you see the outside and you see this beautiful enclosed campus, but then at the same time, the inside of these buildings are full of the technology and state-of-the-art resources for students to do research at the highest level. We have a very flexible curriculum, so on the profiles you see all of our majors. About 60% of our students double major or minor, so they're combining disciplines during their time at Hopkins. And then you also have a smaller campus as well, with about 5,300 undergraduates. Again, those opportunities to meet and interact and work directly with those professors who are Pulitzer Prize winners, Nobel laureates, of which we have several who are teaching on our campus. You have those smaller classes where you're interacting with them very much every day. We lead the nation in research spending, and again, this opens the door for students to do research at the highest level as early on as their first year, not just going in and working in laboratories and getting published in journals and presenting at conferences, but also the opportunity for students to apply for funding as undergraduates. And so even as a first year or second year student, if you have an independent research idea, if you want to do research in the field of public health, or if you want to go abroad and do actual research studying foreign relations or studying foreign governments, or if you want to involve yourself in language immersion, we have funding because of the research spending and the research funding that we get as an institution. So our intention is to graduate students who are going to explore and find new knowledge, who are going to explore those gray areas, who are going to make those discoveries and contribute to those discoveries. Again, this idea of collaboration, it's not just one person and one student who's changing the world. You're ultimately working with teams of professors and graduate students, undergraduates included, to push forward research. That Nobel laureate, he has some undergraduates working in his lab, and they probably bring their own experiences and expertise, as well as the graduate students and the doctors and the faculty as well. So everyone contributes, and everybody wins at the end of the day because of those contributions to the field of science and the humanities. We also have a robust student community. So again, this is why we want to get a sense from your essays and extracurriculars about what student you're going to be. You know, in that audience, in that group up there with our Latin dance group, you have students that are international studies, political science, history, mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering. You have students that are interested in all of these things, but they're still getting involved on our campus community. They're very, very engaged. And again, these are things that we want to get a sense of from your essays. And then this is, again, where we're located. So we're right in the mid-Atlantic, really beautiful part of the country. Baltimore, Maryland is one of the most historic cities in the US, one of the oldest. So you can go to Fells Point with the cobblestone streets. It's like jumping back in time a few centuries. You have the Baltimore Orioles, one of the most historic Camden Yards stadiums, as well as the Baltimore Ravens, our American football team. You're right on the water, Inner Harbor. You have Annapolis, the Naval Academy in the United States, right down the street as well as 12 other universities. So you have the Maryland Institute College of Arts right down the street. You have Goucher, University of Baltimore, Towson University, and so it's a very young and thriving city, and a city that is affordable when it comes to big cities in the U.S. It's great for students on a college budget. There's a lot of free stuff, free events, free festival, free transit around town, and it's a very small, compact city, so it's easy to get around. And we also have a train that takes about 40 minutes and costs $5 that goes down to D.C. as well. So if you want to connect with us, we handed out those brochures. We can provide you any information. You can email me. Again, my email is on that first slide. You can always get in contact with me if you have any questions. But again, we also have Instagram, Facebook, a virtual tour if you want to take a tour of our campus. Really fun stuff there. And then that's our mascot, Jay the Blue Jay. This is actually an older picture. He's just had a facelift. He's a new mascot. He's a little bit scary here. He's got teeth, but we have a much cuter version of Jay the Blue Jay. He was actually named by our students. There was a big competition, and they did the big reveal, and it turns out that his name is just Jay the Blue Jay. So we're looking for creativity too. And we also have opportunities to ask students and things like that. But thank you for coming and for spending time with us and wanting to learn a little bit more. Again, this information is applicable not just to Hopkins, but you can really transfer that. I know that Education USA is hosting some other universities tomorrow. Hopefully, if you go into that session, this gives you a little bit more of a perspective on what universities are really looking for in this process. So thank you. Muchísimas gracias. Have a great night. And for those of you all that tuned in, wherever you're from, thank you for tuning in. So thank you, guys. And thank you again to Education USA. I always like to give a warm thank you to the folks that host us. Many of you all work with them. They are the authority when it comes to studying in the United States, not just at Hopkins, for those of you all that are looking, but also to state institutions, 4-year, 2-year institutions, community colleges, graduate schools. If you ever have any questions about testing, translation services, applying to college, scholarships, whether they're merit-based or need-based awards, they're your resource. And we work with them not just here in Mexico, but around the world. And so just know that you're in good hands here. Okay, cool. Thank you. Gracias.